We're gonna talk, okay?
Okay.
Hi.
You can hear a child say hi to the Miami Beach police officer.
Have a seat in my truck real quick, okay? I don't want your baby to see you.
Look at the woman leaving the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach. Cops say that's Esther Torres in the jean shorts.
In May of 2025, a young woman from Florida was arrested after she'd carried out multiple armed robberies at Miami Beach hotels. The MO adopted by 20-year-old Esther Maria Torres was to seduce men and accompany them to their hotel rooms. While there, she would deploy pepper spray on them and then steal their luxury watches and other possessions. The first reported attack took place at the Breakwater Hotel on March 26th. The victim, who was only described as being an international tourist, was incapacitated with pepper spray, and Torres took his Hugo Boss watch and wallet. 4 days later, Torres employed a nearly identical tactic on a victim at Miami Beach's Fontainebleau Hotel. She made off with a Rolex Submariner valued at $22,000. Torres was caught on surveillance footage in both incidents. In mid-April, a vehicle tied to the robberies was stopped in traffic and a man was arrested. Torres arrived at the scene later on, at which point the police issued a need to identify notice. Further investigation confirmed she was the person caught on camera during the hotel robberies. She was taken into custody weeks later, and the body cam footage of the arrest was made public. Torres had her son with her at the time. He greeted the officers and the woman said, "He knows who the police are." Officers shielded the boy as Torres was placed in a police vehicle. She was initially charged with 2 counts of first-degree robbery. The woman ultimately pleaded guilty to charges of armed robbery, burglary, and third-degree grand theft. She avoided prison time and was given 5 years of probation in July of 2025, sparking criticism that the sentence was too lenient. Number 11. Tat'yana, Gatson, and Jermon Kennard. On June the 3rd of 2022, Tat'yana Gatson was arrested in Tampa, Florida, and charged with second-degree murder following a fatal attempted robbery. According to the police, 23-year-old Gatson used a dating app to arrange a meeting with a man under false pretenses. She presented herself as Jaidee and invited him to the Canes Palms apartments. When the man arrived at the designated location, he was confronted by Gatson and her brother, 18-year-old Jermon Kennard. The latter was wearing a mask and had been lying in wait. Kennard brandished a knife and demanded money from the man. The would-be victim turned the table on the thieving siblings. He drew a firearm and shot Kennard in the head and chest. The youth was taken to an area hospital where he was pronounced dead. Detectives confirmed that the shooter had acted in self-defense and he did not face charges. Gatson was taken into custody the same day and booked into Hillsborough County Jail. She initially claimed that her brother was trying to sell the man an iPhone and not trying to rob him. However, detectives found that she'd given her brother the green light, texted him to come outside when her date arrived. According to Florida law, when a person is killed during the commission of an attempted felony, murder charges can be directed at anyone involved in the crime. As such, Gatson setting up the meeting and initiating the robbery established grounds for a felony murder charge. Number 10. Igor Eduardo Pereira Cabral. On July the 26th of 2025, Brazilian athlete Igor Eduardo Pereira Cabral was arrested in the city of Natal after violently attacking his girlfriend, 35-year-old Juliana Garcia, inside an elevator at their apartment complex. Surveillance footage captured the assault, during which Cabral struck Garcia 61 times. The attack left her with multiple facial fractures and severe disfigurement. Following the incident, she was unable to speak and communicated with police and medical staff through handwritten notes. The victim later recalled, "He told me I was going to die and just kept hitting me non-stop." Cabral was arrested at the scene after a security guard raised the alarm with local law enforcement. Authorities stated that the man had acted in a jealous rage after viewing messages between Garcia and one of his friends. When questioned, he claimed to have suffered a claustrophobic episode exacerbated by the fact that Garcia had allegedly insulted him and ripped his shirt. Investigators dismissed the claim, citing the deliberate nature of the blows and the sustained length of the assault. Police confirmed that Garcia had previously reported psychological and physical abuse during the couple's 2-year relationship, which had been marked by repeated separations and reconciliations. The woman was quoted as saying, "He'd been aggressive in the past, but I never thought it would come to this." Cabral, aged 29, was charged with attempted femicide and ordered to be held in custody. Reports indicated that he had previously represented Brazil at the 2014 Youth Olympic Games as a basketball player, though his professional career had since faded from public attention. The case drew national scrutiny in Brazil due to the scale of violence and the graphic nature of the recorded footage. Garcia underwent reconstructive surgery and the court proceedings against Cabral remained ongoing as of the latest updates. Number 9. Marius Gustavson. On May the 9th of 2024, Marius Gustavson, aged 46, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years at the Old Bailey in London. Gustavson was the central figure in a network that from approximately 2017 to 2021 conducted at least 29 operations described by the court as little short of human butchery. The enterprise included castrations, genital removals, freezing of limbs, administering electric shocks to a male teenager and other extreme body modification procedures, which was streamed on Gustavson's website. He became known as the eunuch maker online. The man was described as the arch manipulator of dozens of victims. The modifications were done without any medical training while using kitchen knives, surgical scalpels and livestock implements. Gustavson and his co-conspirators recruited vulnerable victims, filmed the procedures and sold access to paying subscribers worldwide. The business was estimated to have made over £300,000 from more than 22,000 members. Judge Mark Lucraft described Gustavson as very much the mastermind behind this grisly and gruesome enterprise, and said the motivation of those involved combined intimate gratification with financial reward. The victims started off as willing participants, and Gustavson himself had his manhood removed in 2017, his leg amputated in 2019, and his nipple cut off with a scalpel. Following his arrest, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm, 5 counts of grievous bodily harm with intent, making and distributing an indecent photograph of an underage victim, and possession of criminal property. Boxes found in his flat during the investigation included medical needles and syringes, local anesthetic packs, surgical tools, a body board with restraints, and numerous videos of the procedures. 6 other men admitted their part in this scheme, and their sentences varied from 4 years and 6 months to 12 years. Number 8. Incident in Kazakhstan. On February the 24th of 2016, a man in the city of Atara in western Kazakhstan was caught smuggling 463 pounds of carp in his vehicle. The unidentified suspect, reported as being in his mid-30s, didn't have any of the necessary documentation for the fish and was therefore arrested. The man called various contacts in his phone in an attempt to get out of his predicament. The effort yielded no results. Then, as he sat in the back seat, the suspect started violently beating himself up. He delivered forceful, quick-fire punches to both sides of his face. The 2 arresting officers were dumbfounded by his display and tried to stop him. In the moments that followed, the suspect took out his phone and called the emergency services. He described his bruises as severe and tried to pin the beatdown on the police officers who'd taken him into custody. In a worst-case scenario, his report could have ended in criminal charges against the officers and the end of their careers. However, the suspect's attempt at manipulating the law failed dramatically. Given that the entire ordeal had been clearly captured by surveillance camera inside the vehicle, the outcome of the case remained unclear, but the footage was forwarded to an investigation team. Number 7. Road rage attack on Adam Berry. A routine attempt to pass a slow-moving truck ended in a vicious assault on driver Adam Berry on September the 23rd of 2025 in Los Angeles. There were 3 open lanes on the roadway near Baldwin Hills, and Berry simply went around the other driver who was towing a Toyota Camry. Berry remembered that he did nothing that could have been interpreted as a confrontational act. Regardless, the other driver, who wasn't identified, pulled up alongside him and launched a tirade of homophobic slurs and expletives. Berry didn't engage, drove off and weaved through traffic until he reached La Cienega and Obama Boulevard. He stopped, believing he was safe, at which point he was charged by the other driver. The man kicked his driver's side mirror and pulled him out of his vehicle. He then proceeded to beat Berry as traffic came to a standstill behind them. Everyone's just sitting there watching. No one really got out as far as I could see. I think everyone was pretty freaked out. Blood covered Berry's cell phone and he tried to wipe it off in an attempt to get a photo of his attacker. I can't get the blood off in time. He comes back and I get about 3 more hits to the head. Berry later told a media outlet. The attacker fled by the time the first responders reached the scene. Berry subsequently recovered from his injuries and didn't suffer permanent damage. Updates from mid-October of 2025 indicated that a felony battery charge had been filed, but that the suspect remained at large. Number 6. Jasmine Agostini and Damian David Kelly. 21-year-old Australian woman Jasmine Agostini lured a neighbor to her home in Berkeley, southern Wollongong, on September the 2nd of 2022. When the unnamed man arrived at the address, he was ambushed by 2 men, one of whom was identified as Damian David Kelly. Agostini and her companions subjected her neighbor to horrific abuse. He was struck over the head with a kettlebell and had his hands bound behind his back. The group then lubed up the handle of a frying pan and inserted it into his backside. Afterwards, the handle was held to his nose. Kelly then sliced the victim's ear with a knife and later urinated on him. Agostini, Kelly, and the third assailant, who wasn't identified, left before the owner arrived at the property to find the victim naked, bloodied, and terrified. The owner helped him get cleaned up and called the emergency services. Kelly and Agostini were subsequently arrested. The young woman fled 5 days into her trial in August of 2024, but was caught a little over a week later. Agostini eventually pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including aggravated robbery, inflicting actual bodily harm, and kidnapping in company. She was handed an aggregate sentence of 4 years and 3 months with a non-parole period of 2 years and 2 months. Kelly was jailed for 5 years and 6 months with a non-parole period of 3 years and 2 months. Number 5. Mohammed Ali. Cambridge law enforcement in England spotted drug trafficker Mohammed Ali, aged 21, carrying out a deal in Petersfield Gardens. On April the 13th of 2023, as seen on body cam footage, Ali started running while an officer warned him, "Don't even do it." The suspect tried to jump over a fence but lost his balance and fell to the pavement. In the moments that followed, officers pinned him down and proceeded to handcuff him. While they were doing so, Ali bit one of them in the arm, causing the man to cry out in pain. Law enforcement would learn that Ali had been running a drug line. Crack cocaine and heroin worth £2,670 was found in his possession, in addition to £1,500 in cash and 2 mobile phones. A search of his home in Ravensthorpe, Peterborough, produced £3,310 in cash as well as other drug paraphernalia. In his defense, Ali initially claimed that he was a victim forced to sell drugs by other criminal elements. However, the evidence clearly indicated that he was running a Class A drug enterprise. One of the phones he had on him rang dozens of times while he was in custody, and before being caught, he'd sent hundreds of messages to vulnerable drug users, advertising crack and heroin. Ali pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including assault on an emergency worker, possession of criminal property, and possession with intent to supply crack cocaine and heroin. In April of 2024, Ali was sentenced to 3 years in prison at Huntington Law Courts. Number 4. Incident in Manchester. In the early hours of November the 22nd of 2018, an unnamed man was found hogtied on the side of a street in Salford, Greater Manchester, England. Hours prior, he'd been kidnapped from his home in front of his wife and children. The incident was captured on CCTV, and footage showed the attackers forcing the man inside a vehicle at gunpoint in a frantic emergency call. The victim's wife told an operator that she needs the police quick, and was overheard pleading with the attackers, "There's no money here. I swear to God, there's no money here." When the police arrived at the scene, a body cam captured the victim's son asking his mother, "Did Daddy die? Are they going to kill Daddy?" After his mother tried to comfort him, the boy added, "He had a gun though, a revolver, a 6-shooter. His father was taken to an address where he was beaten to a pulp and tortured. He was struck with a hammer and metal bars, burned with an iron at the knees, and had his ears scorched with a blowtorch. The kidnapping group, who were part of a street gang, asked for £200,000 and only released the victim after they were paid a ransom of £34,000. When the police found him, the victim's face was swollen and bloodied to an unrecognizable extent. He survived his ordeal. Law enforcement was able to track down the address where he was held, and the combination of forensic evidence and surveillance footage led them to Harris Bostock, Blake Evers, and Darren Berkeley. An officer assigned to the case described Bostock as being built like he could kill you with his bare hands, adding he was threatening everybody, all the staff that dealt with him. Bostock, who was 26 years old at the time, received a 9-year sentence for false imprisonment and blackmail. Berkeley received 12 years for blackmail, while Evers got 19 years for grievous bodily harm, possession of a firearm, blackmail, and kidnapping. Number 3. Richard Gathercole. Leading up to the summer of 2017, Richard Gathercole, also known as the AK-47 Bandit, had become the most notorious bank robber in the US. From February of 2012 to July of 2015, Gathercole carried out heists at banks in 5 states and was additionally responsible for a string of other crimes associated with his spree. Gathercole was typically equipped with a bulletproof vest, sometimes marked with police or sheriff, gloves, a balaclava, and much like his nickname suggested, an AK-47 assault rifle fitted with a drum magazine. He would employ maximum terror to gain the compliance of bank employees. He threatened to kill them, lock them in the vault, or he would display an improvised explosive device to cause fear that it would go off in the bank. Gathercole carried out his first heists in California in 2012, then Idaho and Washington in July and November of that same year, before hitting up locations in Iowa and Nebraska the following years. During his first heist on February the 29th of 2012, Gathercole robbed the California Bank and Trust in Chino. When he emerged from the building, he opened fire on a local police officer who was outside. The cop was hit in the leg, suffering a shattered femur and a severed artery that caused profuse bleeding. He was able to drive himself to the hospital and after a lengthy recovery returned to active duty. As he carried out further heists, Gathercole's notoriety increased and the FBI offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to his capture. In June of 2017, a Kansas Highway Patrol officer noticed several irregularities with his car and initiated a stop. Gathercole sped away and repeatedly fired at the pursuing police car, forcing it to increase the distance and eventually resulted in law enforcement losing sight of him. In the aftermath, Gathercole abandoned his vehicle and continued on foot before a farmer offered him a ride outside of Atwood, Kansas. He got into his truck, held the man at gunpoint and forced him to drive towards the Nebraska state line. The farmer was eventually able to escape and Gathercole continued in his vehicle, eventually stopping for gas in Lexington. In the meantime, the owner had filed a carjacking report. Deputies identified the vehicle and arrested Gathercole when he came out of the gas station. 2 Ruger 9mm handguns and 1 Bersa .380 handgun were found in the stolen car. On June the 6th of 2019, Gathercole was sentenced in Lincoln, Nebraska to 35 years in prison. Number 2. Kathryn Restelli. By July of 2025, Kathryn Restelli and her husband, Matthew, had been separated for a few months. They used to reside in California, but Kathryn and their children moved to Utah to live with Kathryn's mother, Tracy Marie Christ. Matthew wanted to bring the children back to California. On July the 12th of 2024, Kathryn lured her estranged husband to her mother's home under the guise that she was willing to get back together. She told him the door would be unlocked and that he was free to enter unannounced. When Matthew made his way into the residence, he was shot and killed by Kathryn's brother, Kevin Ellis. It would emerge that Kathryn, Kevin, and their mother had planned to stage the scene as an act of self-defense. They placed a knife in Matthew's hand to make it seem like he'd gone to the home with violent intentions. Detectives immediately became suspicious. The knife was in 34-year-old Matthew's right hand, but he was left-handed, and a bullet was found in the wrist of the same hand with which he was holding the knife. Additionally, the conspiring trio had been monitoring Matthew as he made the drive to the Utah home through a tracking device that Kathryn had previously placed in his vehicle. Kathryn ultimately took a plea deal. In September of 2025, she was sentenced to 2 terms of 1 to 15 years in prison for murder and conspiracy to commit murder, both second-degree felonies, and 5 years to life for felony discharge of a firearm, a first-degree felony. She was also banned from contacting her children. The trials for Kevin and Tracy were set to commence in January of 2026. Number 1. Jaidee Bingham, Eymaiyah Bradshaw-McKoy, and Mia Campos-Jorge. In the early hours of August the 10th of 2024, Englishman Anthony Marks stumbled into London's King Cross station covered in blood and seeking help for life-threatening injuries he'd suffered in a gang-related attack. He was viciously beaten by a group of girls in their late teens. After turning 18, they were identified as Jaidee Bingham, aka Ghost, Eymaiyah Bradshaw-McKoy, and Mia Campos-Jorge. They'd been working for a county line drug gang. After one of the girls was robbed, Bingham was tasked with finding out who was responsible, and she believed 51-year-old Marks had answers. She and the others confronted him. The man was chased from Argyle Street to Widbourne Street. As the girls hunted him down, he was struck with a car, punched, kicked, stomped on, and repeatedly hit in the head with a gin bottle. The trio only dispersed when a member of the public intervened armed with a cricket bat. Marks died of his injuries a little over a month after the attack. Before and after the brutal beatdown, the teens posed and smiled for photographs and even shared a video, singing and laughing in a car. Loyalty will never be questioned. We get in these fields together. If one swings, the other swings. No violation is ever taken lightly. One of their captions read. The content they shared, coupled with CCTV footage, placed them at the scene of the crime and enabled law enforcement to track them down. In late October of 2025, Bingham was unanimously found guilty of murder, while Bradshaw and Campos-Jorge were found guilty of manslaughter by a majority verdict. Thanks for watching. Assuming you'd become the most powerful person in your state, what's one law you would introduce or change, and why? Let us know in the comments section below.